Hey everybody, it's Scott here again, looking to finish out my top 50 board games of all time list. We are in the top 10 now, doing numbers 10 through 1. I've seen a few good comments that people enjoying this one, and I've got a few other ideas of other videos that I plan on doing after this week, so stay tuned for those as well once I'm done with my big top 50. But if there's any particular questions you guys have or other lists you would like me to do, please let me know in comments, messages on Facebook, whatever. And let me know if there's something in particular you'd like to know my opinion about in the board gaming industry. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So my number 10 is my favorite like space exploration game. I talked about StarCraft, the board game, last week, and how I love it mostly because I love the video game so much. But this, I think, is the space game that I most recommend to other people if they want a big, heavy space exploration game, and that is Eclipse. So in this one, it is a longer game for sure. Typical game of this is going to go 3 to 4 hours usually, I'd say. At least if you got at least 3 or 4 players, and it plays up to six, I'm pretty sure. Um, but now in this one, you are expanding out across, exploring open space, finding planets and aliens, and fighting against the aliens, settling planets, collecting resources from those planets so that you can build better ships, perform research so that you can upgrade your ships or upgrade your abilities in the game in general. Do battle against the other players with their ships and how they've upgraded them. Uh, if you're settling on planets and collecting some of those resources there, you can also be taking more actions per turn in theory, depending on the types of resources you have at your disposal. Whole bunch of different ways you can go in this game, and it feels like a different game every single time because you never know what planets you're going to find, uh, what special bonuses and upgrades you can get to your ship in any given game. The upgrades come out randomly at the end of each round as far as which ones are available. So if somebody's getting the big blasters but more blasters aren't coming out, maybe you're starting to invest more in shields or in your ability to settle planets easier, that sort of thing. Huge amount of strategy in this. It is a heavy game for sure, but it's for how much game there is to this one, it's still not that complicated. It's all really straightforward in how it works. But yeah, so that is Eclipse. At number 9, I have Feast for Odin, again by Uwe Rosenberg. I've talked about him several times in this list so far, but Feast for Odin is probably my favorite of his. And this is another heavy game worker placement, and it's probably the main reason it's as heavy a worker placement game as it is because there are something like 60 odd spots where you can place your workers, as you can see on the board here. Um, but the interesting thing about it is, depending on how good the action is, you're going to require a different number of workers. So if you look at those four columns of actions, the first column of actions is all one worker to place on those. The second column is you have to place two workers to activate any of those, then three workers, then four workers. So it's the options are not quite as uh, widespread as you might think they are. Most of those actions are just upgraded versions of weaker actions. So it really, if say actions column one, versus column three, in the same row, it's more or less the same action. It's just that column three one is better. It takes more workers to trigger it. But what's amazing about this, I mean, it's another Viking style game in that you are exploring and you can do all sorts of different routes to victory in this one. You everything from building huts and houses to hunting, trapping, whaling, pillaging and plundering, harvesting resources, crafting goods and valuables, exploring all these various islands after going out with these warships, emigrating to these other locations from Europe. All sorts of different routes that you can go in this game. Every game that you play of this will feel different from the last one, largely because of the available actions you're going to be choosing each time. Plus, everybody will have occupation cards that will give them a bonus that will make one or two particular actions on the board for them more powerful than usual. Um, so there's all sorts of different ways you can go with this game. So much fun, and again, a heavy game, but really fun. And a lot of the fun. There's also a strong puzzle aspect to this, as you can kind of see on the one of the player boards here. When you collect these green or blue good tiles, you place them on your board in sort of a puzzle way to be able to fill in as much of it possible. But there's a strategic pattern to which you need to be filling stuff in to be maximizing your income and getting additional resources at the start of each round. So it feels a lot more like it feels like a jigsaw puzzle in that regard too. So there's a lot of things going on in this game and makes it a lot of fun. So that's number 9, Feast for Odin. At number 8 is Above and Below. It's sort of a worker placement game. It's sort of more of an action selection type game because you can't really block other people from taking specific actions like you can in other most worker placement games. But this is kind of feels like a choose your own adventure game as well because one of the 5 actions you can take is to explore the depths. So in this game you are building buildings both above the surface and below the surface, hence the name of the game. But in order to build below the surface, you need to be able to explore those depths and clear out an area. And every time you explore the depths, you go to basically like a choose your own adventure style book where you're hit with a scenario and you decide how heavy you want to go after one of 2 or 3 possible outcomes. And then you have to roll your dice to see how well you succeed at it. Regardless, you'll be able to clear the area, but depending on if you succeed or fail at those given actions, you may or may not get a bonus, either money or goods, or even have additional adventurers from the depths join your party, and you have access to another worker now. This game is a lot of fun. I'd say the one downside that this game has is variety of strategy. There's a handful of obvious strategies that work really well in this game, but overall, just the fact that it has that choose your own adventure style thing going on, huge replay value to it anyways. So that is Above and Below. I have heard really good things about the sequel to this game. I believe it's called Near and Far. I'd love to try that one sometime. A lot of people say that game has completely remove this game from consideration for most people anymore. No one wants to play Above and Below anymore if they've played Near and Far. So I'd be intrigued to try that one out to see how good that one actually is. Let's see. I believe that was number 8. So at number 7 is the number 1 board game of all time right now, according to Board Game Geek, Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is a very heavy tactical sort of fantasy dungeon crawl game. In this game, there are, I believe, 100 scenarios. So, and to play one scenario takes a 3-hour session. So, you can get a whole lot of mileage out of this game just by playing all these different missions. And if you don't beat a mission, you can go back and do that mission again. So, you're not going to get only 100 plays out of this because guarantee you are going to fail a mission a time or two or more. But what's amazing about this game is it's a legacy style game, which means that every time you play the game, you come back the next week and whatever happened in the previous session affects this current session as well. So like when you clear a location, may provide you with new resources. Each player has a character that they're playing as, and the game starts with 6 different characters to choose from. But over the course of the game, as each character completes some of their objectives, they may unlock other aspects of the game, such as other characters you can play as. So you can retire a character if you want to try something new and bring in a character that no one would have had access to originally when you had first started the whole campaign. But yeah, admittedly I've only played maybe 3 or 4 sessions of this game. So I haven't seen much of the game. I've only seen just a small tasting of it, but the little bit I've seen, it's absolutely incredible. I believe Kickstarter just finished off a campaign to come out with a sequel of this game, Frosthaven. And they've talked about a few of the changes that they made from Gloomhaven to Frosthaven. And it's about 90 to 95% identical, with the exception of new scenarios and a few slight tweaks to the rules. But it looks amazing, and I'd love to try that one as well. So that is my number 7 game, Gloomhaven. Number 6. Oops, sorry, there's the board. This poster just sitting on that. So I guess one other thing I can talk about now that I have up here, what makes part of this game so clever is on your turn you have these like 9 or 10 action cards in your hand that you will be picking 2 of them on any given turn and playing both of them. One of them will determine your initiative. But when you flip them both over, you're going to use the top action on one card and the bottom action on the other card. Or if you don't like one of those options, you can do a simple move ability or a simple attack ability. So there's multiple ways of using each of these cards, and trying to weigh out which ones you want to use for what features is really ingenious. And again, this game is actually, I forgot to mention, this is completely cooperative. You're working with everybody else trying to beat the game itself as well. And the mechanics for how the enemies operate is also brilliant. It's all card driven instead of random dice driven. So everything balances out a little bit better than if you're just rolling dice. So moving on to number 6, which is Stone Age. This is one of my other intro level games that anytime I want to introduce people to worker placement games, I will either use this game or Lords of Waterdeep, which I talked about, I believe, last week. In Stone Age, what you're doing is you have a bunch of cavemen, basically, who are trying to build up a civilization, and you're going out and doing all sorts of things to working on your agriculture, building tools, collecting resources such as wood, brick, stone, and gold, and then trading in those resources to build huts or trade with people downstream who have brought their boats upstream to trade goods and resources, and you can get victory points off of those as well. The kicker with all this, is as many of you start with 5 workers, but you can get more workers over the course of the game. But you also have to be able to feed all of your workers. So if you start running out of food and you can't feed all your workers, you're going to lose points off of that. And so it's this great balance of trying to balance how much food you're producing with how many workers you have at your disposal, and going out and collecting those resources. And the fun thing with collecting resources, unlike others where you put out a single worker and you will collect like 1 wood or 1 gold, whatever it may be, in here you have to put out multiple workers and roll to see how many resources you collect and you roll 1 die for each worker you put out. You have to hit a certain number in order to be able to collect each resource. So like for instance in this image, red has 3 workers on wood, and so and wood has a value of 3 in this game. So after you roll your dice, you divide that by 3, the total of those 3 dice, and that'll tell you how much wood you're going to collect. So you could roll garbage and just roll 3 ones and get 1 wood for the 3 workers you got there, or you could roll really high, get 3 sixes, and collect 6 wood off of that. So it's a little bit of playing your odds. You can correct that with tools. So if you are worried about rolling garbage, tools will allow you to correct for unlucky rolls. But yeah, a whole bunch of gameplay out of this one. Love playing this one. Several different strategies you can go for, and very intro level friendly. I've taught this to several people, and it's gone over pretty well pretty much every time. That is my number 6, Stone Age. My number 5 is Outlive. This was, I think, is the last time I've done a Kickstarter, and back to Kickstarter to get a game. I had sworn off a Kickstarter for a little while because I'd been burned a couple times on those, but when I saw it, and so it had been maybe a year or two after that had happened, that this one came up on Kickstarter, and I'm like, okay, I got to give this one a chance. This one looks so good. It's ticking all the right boxes for me for a good board game. And I was not disappointed with the result. In Outlive, it is sort of a post-apocalyptic world in which you are going out trying to collect resources and keep your fallout shelter alive. And whoever does it the best over 6 rounds is going to be the victor. And the best is defined by going out, finding the most artifacts and repairing all these supplies and artifacts, getting the most survivors to join your colony. There's a few different ways of scoring points in this game. But what's really clever about this is it's not exactly worker placement because your workers never leave the board. But at the start of each turn, all your workers, when you activate a worker, you're going to flip it from laying on its side to flipping up and move it to a location. And it can't be to a location where you already have a worker. And there's only 8 spots on the board, and each person has 4 workers out there. So you have to move a worker off of a location if you want to be able to access that location in the same round. So say, like, it looks like blue has not activated yet on here. So if they want to go to, say, the ship there in the center, they first have to flip up their blue player on the ship and move either 1 or 2 spaces to the left or right in a sort of, I can't say left or right, I guess clockwise or counterclockwise in the various spaces on the board in order to activate it. And then that'll free up the ship for a future turn where they can move one of their other workers into that spot. But this game's really clever in that you can find these items around the board, which allow you to, which once you repair them with goods such as microchips, metal, etc., they allow your actions to get better at certain locations. So you might be able to collect every time you go to the quarry, or I forget if it's the quarry or the mine or whatever, but you can collect more iron when you're there. If you go to the military depot, you can collect more bullets. Um, and there's also huge player interaction in this game, in that you're all that workers can put pressure on each other. So if one person's activated their 3 value worker and move to a location, the next player activates their 5 value worker and moves on top of that same location. They put pressure on the other player, and that player has to basically pay them goods in order to fend them off and make sure that they don't get wiped out type thing. So there's always that will he, won't he type thing going on in this game. Am I going to get attacked if I take this action, or do I just go for it? And so that's what's going on during the main round. But then there's a whole uh, sort of upkeep section at the end of each round where you are. Whoops, I didn't put that image in. Oh well. Where you are managing your fallout shelter and building different rooms in your fallout shelter which give you other bonus abilities, but you have to have survivors to power those rooms, and in order to keep those survivors alive, you have to be getting even more food in, which means if you're getting food in to feed these survivors to keep these abilities alive, that's less food that you can spend to get additional survivors in. It's this whole balancing act that is really clever. Hard to give away my next one, so we'll just jump right into that one. My number 4 game of all time is Star Wars Rebellion. Uh, Now, I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I absolutely love all the movies, really. The newest trilogy I'm okay with, but in general, I love all the movies. All the lore from like Star Wars, Clone Wars, Rebels, etc. Um, and so this is the game where that most people says feels like the true Star Wars experience. You are basically reliving the original trilogy in this game. In that, uh, this is a 2-player game. One person is playing the Rebel Alliance. The other team is playing the Empire. The Rebel Alliance is just trying to survive for as long as possible and stir up controversy in the galaxy against the Empire. The Empire's sole goal is to try to figure out which planet the rebels have their secret base hidden on. And they have a whole bunch of routes of trying to find that base, from moving their armies out and attacking various planets throughout the galaxy, setting out probe droids to be able to ping to see if they can get information about which, and to rule out which planets they could possibly be on. Each side has mission cards that they can activate with their different heroes. So, like, the rebels could be activating these missions with Leia or Chewbacca or Han. The Empire could be activating their missions with Vader or Palpatine or Boba Fett. Um, and uh, and these missions will allow them to either, if they're rebel mission, they allow them to either to usually mess with the Empire even further. The Empires will usually be really good at getting information out of the rebels as far as where their secret base might be located. Um, and it's all about if the Empire can find that base in a certain amount of time. But I think it's like 15 rounds. But the rebels have secret objective cards, which if they complete one of these objective cards, they can play it and decrease the total round counter. So now instead of winning in 15 rounds, the rebels might be able to win if the Empire can't find them in 13 rounds, and that can just keep dropping over time. I think I think every time I've played this, if the rebels have won, it's usually gotten it down to a total of maybe 9 rounds. Um, but yeah, it's it's truly magical how you can make your own story out of this Star Wars deal. Before I had first played it, one of my coworkers from grad school had told me that he was playing with his daughter, and he was playing as the Empire, his daughter was playing as the Rebels, and he managed to capture Chewbacca, turn Chewbacca to the dark side, and use Chewbacca to capture Princess Leia. I mean, it's just, you can truly make it your own story in here, and it's a lot of fun in that regard. Uh, it is a longer game and a more advanced game. I think a typical game of this will go anywhere from an hour and a half if the Empire ends up winning to probably 3.5 to 4 hours if the Rebels end up winning. But yeah, if you love Star Wars, this is a true Star Wars experience. That is Star Wars Rebels at number 4. At my number 3 is Great Western Trail. Now, I've actually only played this maybe 2 or 3 times, but this is a really clever, really thematic game that I really can't compare to any other game, I don't think. Not that comes to mind. But in Great Western Trail, you are basically doing a cattle drive, working your way to St. Louis to be able to ship cattle to elsewhere in the United States. And the whole process is you are moving from outpost to outpost and using these abilities at these various outposts in order to improve your hand of cattle cards, to uh, get yourself more money, get yourself more scoring objectives. Um, this whole time, I mean, there's so many different routes you can go in this one, depending on which buildings you choose to build. Um, you can hire all sorts of helpers. As far as you can see on the left side, there are cowboys, engineers, and carpenters, and they will give you different bonuses. The cowboys will allow you to buy better cattle cards to get more points out of them. Engineers will allow you to will help you in shipping your cattle further and further from St. Louis to get more victory points. Engineers will allow you to build better and better outposts to not only give you better abilities to do, but then can also get in the way of your opponents. Um, so a whole bunch, and I could go for a long time on all the different things you can do in this game. There's a lot going on in this game, but it is really clever. A great theme that I feel is a theme that is rather underutilized in board games, but really really fun. That is Great Western Trail at number 3. At number 2 is Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game. Excuse me, parched. All right, so Dead of Winter is a zombie game. And I feel one of the best zombie games out there. I've only played a handful, maybe 3, 4, 5, something like that. But what's amazing about Dead of Winter is how immersive this game feels. It truly feels like you are trying to survive a zombie apocalypse uh, in cold conditions. Uh, there's so much great storytelling in here. So in this game, there are maybe a dozen different objective cards, and you pick one at the start of the game that everyone is going for. So this is a semi-cooperative game. Everyone is more or less working for the same objective, but because everyone will have a little secret objective card that they also have to complete in order to win the game. The kicker is there's a chance that one of the players could draw a betrayal card, which means they have their own personal objective they're going for. One of which is that that the morale hits 0 and everybody else loses the game. Um, so everyone's always a little suspicious of who's actually working for them and who's working against them. The trader can't be really overt with saying with their actions and blatantly working against the players, because the players can just vote them out of the colony and allow them less access to abilities and features in the game. So the trader has to be a little discreet with what they're doing, but this is such a clever game in that as advanced as it is, as many options as there are in this game, it's all very intuitive. Like when I teach this game, it probably takes me half hour, 45 minutes just to teach the game, but it's really intuitive and straightforward. Usually once I'm done explaining, there are no questions to say. I know, yeah, the players are like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm going to do. It's pretty clear. Um, I want to try for this strategy. I'm going to work with these heroes, and again, each player is going to have 2 characters that they're working with, each which has a special ability, and each of which has a certain efficiency with which they can kill zombies, and a certain efficiency with which they can search these various locations, like the grocery store or the police station, for additional supplies. Um, and again, and all these other features, you've got to be able to feed all your people in the colony. You've got to defend off from all these zombies that are going to be showing up at the end of every single round. There's so much going on here, and so dark and immersive. It's really a fun game. Um, and one of the magical things that people is they introduced this what they call crossroads, which is where the subtitle is in, these crossroads cards. At which point, whenever each player starts their turn, the player to their left picks up a card and looks at a condition at the top of the card that will say if this scenario is going on the board, if this has happened on the board, or the player does this on their turn, read out the scenario, stop the game and read out the scenario, and you have to do sort of a choose your own adventure style decision in that moment, which could hurt and or help you depending on which option you choose. And it's like most of the decisions are very difficult. It's like, okay, do I help these people, which means we have more mouths to feed, which might make it difficult to survive. Our morale might start taking a hit if we can't feed that many people. But at the same time, they are bringing a lot of supplies to us, and they're going to make things a lot easier for us in other regards of the game. So it's this huge trade-off about which direction you're going to go with it. Really clever game. I always look for an excuse to get this game out year-round. I had a few friends who insisted on only playing this in the winter. I'm like, no, we need to play this more often than that. But yeah, that is Dead of Winter, my number 2. So before I get into number one, I wanted to give a couple honorable mentions. I put this list together quite a while ago, almost a year ago now, and in that year, I've only played a few new games, not enough that I felt I should start make an entirely new top 100 list, top 50 list for the case of this video. But there's been a couple that I've played that I feel could have made the top 50. I don't know if they would have or not, but I just want to give three of those a shout out right here, very briefly. So one of them, I picked up Silver and Gold recently. This is a really simple, tiny little game, flip and right, where you flip a card that has a polyomino in it, and each of you has little treasure map cards, and you are crossing off boxes on those cards, trying to fill in this little treasure map card. When you do fill out all the boxes on it, you can score it for points, and whoever has the most points at the end of something like 4 rounds, 4 rounds of 7 cards, will win the game. Really straightforward, easy to learn, plays in like 20 minutes. But yeah, really fun little filler game, Silver and Gold. Another one is Reiner Knizia's Kingdoms. This is an older game. I think this came out in like 94. But in this one, you are, on each of your turns, you're either putting out a castle to score as a point source, or you are flipping a tile from a stack of tiles, sort of Carcassonne style, and placing it somewhere on the board. And those could give you negative points or positive points depending on if it's in the same row as one of your castles. And it's positive or negative, that castle will score that many points. But you have ways of manipulating those points, and you're trying to put things in the same row and column as your castles that are going to give you positive points, trying to put all the negative things in the rows and columns of your opponent's castles. Pretty straightforward game, and whoever has the highest score after 3 rounds of filling in this little 6x5 grid wins. And the other one, I think this next one is the one that is most likely to have shown up in my top 50 if I had included it in my ranking, and that is Tiny Towns. Tiny Towns just came out last year and is a very simple game of building each of these little buildings in your town. But it's sort of it's not exactly action selection, it's resource selection, in that one person will declare, I am taking, say, wood. When he takes a wood, everybody else at the table takes a wood, and they have to place it on their board. And when you put your various resources in, oops, I didn't put another deal in it. Whenever you put your resources in a particular pattern that matches one of the buildings out there, you can take those resources off your board and put one of the buildings on one of those spots, and it's going to score you points in various ways. This is a game you can teach somebody else easily in like 2 minutes. So it's one of the easiest games in the world to learn. It's also one of the hardest games in the world to master, I would say. There are so many different ways you can go with this game, trying to figure out strategies for which buildings you're going to build each turn. And I say easy to play. Quick example there. A friend of mine, I believe her niece is something like maybe 4 years old, and she plays this game with her dad. She has learned this game with her dad. At the same time, I have played this with like 7 other adult strategy gamers, and we have been struggling to figure out exactly what we want to do on our turn. So there's a huge amount of strategy in this game, despite how easy it is to learn. Love Tiny Towns. So I bet this one would have made it my top 50 if I had included it. But we'll get straight to my number one now, and that is, and most people who know me know this about me, that this is my number one game, is Castles of Mad King Ludwig. I love this game. It is it does a couple different things that are brilliant in here. It has this sort of I price things and you choose. So similar to the classic conundrum of kids who can't argue, who are fighting over who gets the bigger piece of cake. Give the knife to one of the kids, they cut the cake. The other kid gets to choose first which piece of cake he's taking. It's kind of that going on here. One player gets to price these various rooms, and then everybody else gets first selection before that player as far as which rooms they are going to buy and put in their castle. And everybody is trying to build a castle up of all these various rooms to complete certain objectives. Every game, the objectives are going to change. There are three or four communal objectives. So in the example shown here, it's whoever has the most corridor rooms, whoever has the most square-shaped rooms, and whoever has the largest area of kitchen rooms in their castle is going to score bonus points. But in addition to that, you each have your own little objective cards that will give you your own way of scoring bonus points at the end of the game. So you're also weighing in on trying to prioritize some of those rooms as well. In addition, as you can see on this image, each individual room also has its own ways of getting points outside of the communal and personal objectives. So I love tile placement games. Anything with spatial planning, I absolutely love in board games because that's just how my mind works. Is being able to plan out things like that ahead of time and position things how I want them to. Um, Really beautiful little game. This was a game when I had first got it. I had never heard about it. I just randomly got this from my sister for Christmas one year, and it has quickly become my favorite. Several of my friends' favorites. I believe this is still my parents' favorite game to play. Lords of Waterdeep may have taken that over, but still, this is still a go-to for all of us in the family. So that is my number one, Castles of Mad King Ludwig. So that's been my top 50 board games of all time. Again, if you have any ideas for any other like little top 10 lists, little brief top 10 lists of certain categories of games, feel free to ask my opinions on, say, favorite X style games, family games, or filler games, whatever it may be. I don't know exactly how many different modern strategy games I have played now at this point, but it has to be pushing three or 400. I think on Board Game Geek I have 180 ranked, and I know I've played a lot more than that. I've got a little bit of experience here. So if you have any questions, let me know. Till next week, have a good one.